Tell me your name and how you would describe yourself to the audience.
My name is Scott Yates. I am the international leader of the Lock the Clock movement, otherwise known as a guy that has a blog that writes about daylight saving time and fixing it.
So, this passed the Senate unanimously a few years ago. Not many things get through the Senate unanimously. Remind us what happened in the House and, why this hasn't been able to get through up until now.
My son always says pro is the opposite of con, and Congress is the opposite of progress. The rules in Congress are so bizarre. They're hopeless for anybody to try to figure out. What happened in the Senate was great progress, but that was the last session, and then when that session ends, all those bills are just dead, and you have to start from scratch. So now we've started from scratch, and we're in this session, which ends at the end of this year. The good news is the Senate Commerce Committee did pass the Sunshine Protection Act, and the House just last week passed the bill. But what they did was interesting. They didn't pass the bill itself. They put it into the transportation bill, and the transportation bill has to pass by September. There's all kinds of stuff relying on that. So, there's a chance that it could actually come out of this process and get signed and be law.
And with the president saying on social media that he's really going to push for this, does that give it a better chance, do you think?
Yeah, it worries me a little bit because there are so many people that dislike the president so much that they may think that this is some kind of Republican trick. And there's a little bit of history with that because the last time this was passed was in 1974, right before Watergate, and it was pushed by President Nixon and then was done away with, and people thought it was a Republican trick for a long time. So the thing we need to emphasize is how bipartisan this is. That bill that passed in the House was, I think it was 48 to 1. So there's clearly a lot of Democrats and a lot of blue states that are very much in favor of this.
Yeah, since you mentioned what happened in the 70s, the read on that has been that, people hated it being so dark in the mornings on the winter. Is that really how it went? And how would this be different?
No, it'd be very different. The thing that got messed up in the 70s was this. They had the idea to do this in like October. Things were very different in Washington those days. They had the idea to do it in October. They passed it partially in November. They actually passed it and had it signed a couple of days before Christmas, and then enacted it in January 6th of 1974. So there was no prep time, there was no lead time, and it started on the worst Monday morning of the year, that Monday right after you're coming back from the Christmas break. And so everybody hated it because they weren't ready for it. They weren't. So the way to do it was the way that we should do it is with a nice long phase in where everybody has time to prepare. And then we just switch in the fall the way that we usually do. And that way it'll be the same as we go through the winter. There won't be a big change. And then we'll have then it'll be much more stable and much more predictable, and people will like it then.
One of the bigger hangups seems to be whether we should stay on daylight saving time or we should stay on standard time. Which is better and why?
I don't actually have a dog in that fight. I just want to stop switching. I understand the arguments from both sides. I think, and this is what I've said to for years now, that each state should really get to decide for itself. The answer for people in Los Angeles is going to be a lot different than the people in Indiana and the people in Massachusetts. And the thing that I've always said is we should just have a little lead-in time so that the people in each state can decide, yes, we want to lock into this time or we want to lock into that time. But the way the bill is now, it would lock everybody into daylight saving time unless they made a change, but it gives them enough time to be able to actually make that change.
If every state decided for themselves, we could end up with a patchwork of all different times across the country, right? Would that be better?
We could end up with a patchwork. That's what we have now is a patchwork. It's just a matter of where you draw the line. And the only places that it's really going to make a difference is on the places that are right on the border. So Indiana is a classic example. Part of the state is with Chicago. Most of the state is in the same time zone as Massachusetts, which is 1,000 miles away. It's ridiculous. The whole state should be together in one time zone. What I think is they should be in permanent standard time. But that's not really for me to decide. That's up to the people of Indiana. And that would just mean that the line, instead of going, sort of straight down by Chicago, would just jog over to the right a little bit.
One of the biggest arguments for switching has always been this idea of saving energy, but the data doesn't really support that, right?
No, the science is, there are lots and lots of very valid reasons to stop switching the clock. The energy argument has never really been one. The reason that we all say that is that that's actually the original reason that we had daylight saving time was Germans doing it to save what they called fuel oil. And but really, I think even in that case, it was a big distraction from the fact that they were losing World War One.
So do you think this is really going to happen this time?
Well, I'm hopeful. I've been working on this for 10 years. I'm hopeful. I think that there's a decent chance. I think the thing that may be both exciting and disappointing to people at the same time is what I have been pushing for is a 2-year phase in, which would mean that the law would pass this year, but then we wouldn't get the joy of not having to switch the clocks until daylight saving time in a couple of years.
Why did you take this on as a personal crusade?
Just because I hated it, I hated the changing of the clocks, and I had read a book called The Complaint-Free World, I think it was, where you're not supposed to complain about things. You're supposed to just either not complain or take action. And I thought I could take action, so I just put together a little blog, and that took off, and legislators started contacting me and asking me for help, and then it's just grown and grown until last year I actually testified at the Senate Commerce Committee at the United States Capitol, and that was quite a surprise for a kid from Denver.
Scott Yates, founder of the Lock the Clock movement. Scott, thanks.
Absolutely.